Good afternoon. The today's class of machine tools and machine cutting would like to proceed towards the boring machine classifications and different types of boring machines based upon its operating categories, different kinds of boring machines that are existing. We'll be discussing in a detail today with respect to today's class. Terminally, boring machine was being utilized for commencing the holes, that too in a large and heavy parts. Normally we used to utilize the heavy objects in our engine parts, automobile engine parts, such as the basic frame of the engine, steam engine cylinders, and even the machine housings, frame structures of the entire automobiles, cascading objects, mounting devices, etc. Normally, which is very much practically impossible to hold and rotate in an engine lathe or drilling machine, can be accessed over this boring machine. So boring machine has a greater advantage of moving the entire tool accessing device up to a particular phase confining action of a place and commencing the activity wherever that it is necessary for us. By utilizing minimal attachments such as towards this boring machine, we can use for screw cutting, turning process, planetary grinding, gear cutting, etc. Let us confide the basic difference between this boring and the turning process. Boring is the operation that's being done for enlarging the inner diameters, even having the existing holes for an existing holes, as if the turning operation, it's used to reduce the diameter of the work parts, and even for knurling operations, threading operations, step cutting operations. In the case of our drilling operations, was to formulate the internal hole commencing process, to a particular diameters by this MRR activity. So the work part worked out by this work tool. Even this boring is an internal turning operation. We could say practically it's an internal turning operation that's being executed for the better accuracy generations, for confiding the smoothness upon this drilling process. So after commencing the drilling process, in order to confide this smoothness for the objects internally where the drill sections has been considered with respect to a particular diametric status, this boring activity will be getting commenced. So hence we can say that it's an internal turning operation. Coming to the types of this boring machines, we are having two different types according to its operational statistics. First one is the horizontal and second one is an vertical. In the case of this horizontal boring machine, the rotational axis of this work part is in horizontal position, whereas the vertical boring machine, the work part will be an vertical strategy. So the placing of this work part and axis of its rotation will be getting varied with respect to its positions, either in horizontal or vertical. So practically, boring is a process that produces the internal hollow sections which are commenced after the drilling process. And we could say that the finishing actions that can be progressed for the already having drilling sections. Typically, it uses a single point cutting tools, commonly called this boring bar. In this, both vice versa, the operations can be progressed. That first one, by rotating the boring bar, we can progress the boring activity. That enlarging of the already structured holes which are commenced by the drilling process, or smoothening the rough profile for the internal hollow sections. That's an initial strategy, and later on, by fixing this boring tool, work part will be getting rotated and commencing of the activity as we desire for finishing and enlarging of the internal diameters, bore diameters. Nominally, the tool that will monitor over the stationary piece, workpiece will be holding within the chunks, and the tool is being rotated over the channel sections, take confined diametrical stage and monitored over the workpiece. Particularly, we used to observe this in the boring mills. Even this boring can be accomplished on the turning machine, which is positioned with respect to the boring bar in the tool post and rotating workpiece that is held in the chuck of the lathe. And we will be clearly visualizing in the diagram. This is the consideration. And initial diameter is the old bore diameter that is extended in wide. And this is the additional diameter that is being required for us. And for that, the tool will be getting inserted within the already drilled check sections, and the diameter will be getting enhanced upon removal of the material. And this is the vertical motion of commencing the boring activity, and this is the horizontal mode of getting the activity, that by fixing the object within the lathe chunks and operating with respect to the tool which is fixed in the tool post, as it is representing very much clearly in the pictorial representations. Coming to the classifications of these boring machines, hence it is very much clear for us till now that boring is nothing but the enlarging of the already existing diameters to incremental of the diameters, or else indeed to commence the overhead sections of the increment up to a particular length that the head of the nail will be existing, or to the stud of the bolt or head of the nut, we can say. So those will be compatible with respect to the, or insertable characterizations considerations with respect to the surface layer. So that's the work progress sequentially commenced for internal aziering sections in the case of this boring activity. Coming to its classifications, it has been classified into 4 different heads. First one is the horizontal boring machine, vertical boring machine. Second thing, next thing, it is a precision boring machine and jig boring machine. Coming to this horizontal boring machine, it is again subclassified into 4 different categories. First one is the floor type of boring machine. Second thing is a floor type of boring machine. Third one is a planar type of boring machine. Finally, fourth one is the multiple head type of boring machine. So each and every representation or subclassification is having its own strategy of work that will varies with respect to its time period. And one of the characterizations, movable or dynamic motion will be existing for the tools in one condition and to the work parts in the other conditions. In the case of these vertical boring machines, it's again subclassified into 2 different categories. There is vertical turret lathe and standard vertical boring machine. Third one is the precision boring machine. Need to have the dimensions with respect to the standard results. Finally, the zig boring machine, which is subclassified into 2 types, that is vertical milling machine type and planar type. Vertical milling machine used to monitor with respect to the dimensions also in 3-dimensional strategies. Planar type as if the surface finishing, also the additional factors commenced apart with respect to the bore. These machines can be horizontal or vertical, as we have been discussed, that classified according to the orientation or axis of rotation of the machine spindle. These are the horizontal boring machine and a vertical boring machine. See, consider here the tool position is getting varied. Monitoring accessories. So these are the pallets which are having the capacity of holding the heaviest objects. that lifts the holding objects to upward direction from the pallets to upward direction, and the performance activity it will be getting done in an horizontal way. So the tool movement will be fixed and work part will be getting varied commencing of the activity with respect to the horizontal phase in an horizontal phase. And this is a vertical boring mill or boring machine, which is having the tool position that is progressed in the case of likewise similar to a drilling machine. The work parts will be here fixed and tool will be getting having varied in its motion towards up and down actions. So that will be getting monitored with respect to the operator. Here, the heaviest hydraulic power will be utilized for commencing the exact ratio of the feed rates and speed of the spindle in case of its rotation, and the depth of cut will be monitoring manually because these are the machineries which are conventionally operated. This is a schematical representation in the case of this horizontal boring machine. Let's have the detailed discussion regarding its parts. Headstock, which holds the driving factors, a spindle, and speed and its orientations can be progressed over this. Pulley for counterbalancing weight of headstocks. So if the less mediations of weights has been considered, the speed will be getting varied, and for that, for counterbalancing, the pulley is connected for the headstock with respect for commencing of balancing a ratio of weights. Third one is the headstock elevation screw, which is interaction of this entire head with respect to the channel. Boring head that is fixed with respect to the headstock. Boring cutter on the boring bar. So commencement of the work agitations to be progressed over the work parts. And sixth one is the work that is being commenced, and there's the hatched section that is the work that is being progressed, and entire this channel has been fixed with respect to an internal strategy for incrementing its diameters, and this is the internal diameter, and this is the hollow sections which is shown in a half sectional view. Boring cutter on the boring bar, work and supporting column, bearing block, saddle, cross slide, and the table for holding the work parts over it fixedly with respect to jigs and fixtures. These are the different parts that are being existing in the case of this horizontal boring machine, and the entire commencement of our work with respect to different internal bore diameters will be progressed with respect to the skillful worker or operator. And in this, in the case of this horizontal axis of tool revolution, we can commence the different operations in the single machinery, even in the boring machinery, by altering with respect to the tools that the boring process, reaming process, turning process, threading process can be commenced, facing operations can be done, milling operations can be done with respect to three-dimensional strategies, the grooving operations can be done. Only this all can be accessed because of or by varying with respect to the tools. Particularly in the case of this horizontal boring machine, in order to access with respect to the spindle face plate, a machine for accessing with the different diameters. In case of that, the boring bar must be supported on the other end for accessing the boring long bore diameters, and even for the smaller diameter of the holes also. In the case of menial range. So how that can be progressed in the case of an heaviest and mini, that the commencement of the feed rate by imparting with respect to the tool movements, that will be having a detailed discussion over it. See here, first one, in the case of this horizontal boring machine, in the initial pictorial representation, work part is fixed within the chunk, and movement of this tool is being getting considered for the boring activity. So the orientation will be getting done here by the rotation of this spindle, and tool is monitored over it by commencing the feed for MRR process, and this is the cutting process. We can clearly visualize here that the bore diameter, initial diameter is this one, and after the working, this is the incremental in diameter internally towards the work part. So here, in this case, the work part is fixed and tool is being in a dynamical motion with a particular feed motions. And second thing, it is work part is being in motion with respect to a confined conciliation status, and tool will be having its supporting movements with respect to the counteractions created by the work part. Hence, what here in the second condition, second block diagram, workpiece should be monitored in the case of feed alignments, because this tool in the case of second one is fixed in its rotation, because it will be getting fixed to the spindle, and that will be rotating with respect to an same diametrical status. So in order to increase the bore diameter internally within the work parts, the work part should be monitored in case of its feed motions for commencing. So hence this table and chucks which are holding the work part is being having the feed motions for the work agitations. This is the consideration of horizontal boring machine. Coming to the point of this vertical boring machine, typically it is used for large and heavy parts which cannot be held up within the two different headstock and the tailstocks, nominally having with respect to the diameters up to 12 meters of range. So nominally ferrous content parts which are having more than the 12, more than 1 meter, even the half meter, will be having a huge weight factor. Hence, cannot be held up with respect to an holding devices such as headstock and the tailstock, which is connected with respect to the spindle in between. And hence, the table and chuck that will be having a rigid motion, and thereover will be facing these objects, and with respect to the tool movements only will be accessing this boring activity over that particular work parts. The typical boring mill have position and feed several cutting tools according to the type of material. We'll be utilizing the tools indeed to commence the boring activity. Thus, that enhancing of the internal diameters, or else conditioning of the channel sectioned incremental bores up to a particular length for the fixation of bolts and nuts or the mounting devices. And typical diagram is this in the case of this vertical boring machinery. See the tool fixation, the bore bar, which is made up of cemented carpets, and nominally these are the PCBN tools we'll be calling, or CBN tools, carbon boron nitride tools, which is having much heaviest in its strength, used to fix up at the boring bar, and MRR direct contact will be acting, and this is the pictorial representations that is being progressed with this here side tool head, which is holding this CBN tools in order to progress the actions, counter actions over the work part. And this is the entire pictorial representation of monitoring its vertical boring mill. Is the cross rails that are used for holding the checks, which are having the capability of moving or sliding towards the up and down actions. The work part will be in fixed condition because it's a huge weight factor, because of its huge weight factor. Columns, side column, which is supported for holding the entire tool and tool holders, and it's a sliding gauges blocks. Most probably use it for commencing the large diameter objects in the case of this vertical agitations. See here, nominally with respect to different constrainment zones. So internal diameter or else externally performing and the facing operations. We have discussed the several operations can be progressed simultaneously. That too over a single part. And with respect to different sliding actions can be monitored by this tool sliders. So some tool sliders having the movement of more forward and backward movement, which can be operated in the outer channels of the work part. And this is the sectional channel used for operating the surface finishing of this bar from the internal bore diameter to the external bore diameter. And this is the tool head that will be having for commencing the internal factor, by which the tool will be getting folded in like this format, and internal threading, for threading also threading will be getting considered upon orientation of this work part on the work table with respect to the static base mounting to the work table. So these are the considerations happening in the case of this vertical boring machine. So typically we'll be utilizing this vertical boring machineries for commencing the operations on large machine tool casings and even the engine blocks for a permanent strategy of work. And even machining internal wiring diameters in large castings, which nominally will be often heavy in its weight factors. Finish of its machining of cylindrical surfaces on very large workpieces. Coming to the parts of this vertical boring machine, its bed, table, housing, cross rail, and tool head assembly were used to refer very much clearly. There's some housing which is used for internal holding of the entire parts. Rail casings utilized for the sliding motions, cross rails for sliding motions towards the horizontal or vertical guides, vertical tool posts and horizontal tool posts, tile side tool heads, and the bed which is on static in motion and that's mounted with respect to the rotating table, holding with the rotating table. Those the maximum vibrations that are being generated by the work rotating table will be pulled out with respect to the bed without causing any deviation during the process for the dimensional aspects. In the case of dimensional aspects, and coming to the application point of view, for commencing its activity, the zig boring machine, which is operating in an with an advanced features that is simple in operation and commencing the entire activities with respect to an impartation of automation technology towards it, that leads to an increasing in its productivity, that too in the case of quantity by maintaining a particular quality. So increasing in quantity per day or per hour and increasing its quality and having the precise ratio of work will be getting progressed by decreasing the human effort at the time of working process that is being considered. There's a zig boring, there's a zig boring machine, and this is the generally zig that is being utilized for holding the work part and as well as the commencement of works by driving, which is giving mounted over this ceiling channel, which used to drive from one place to another place and holding the objects over here and commencing the activity by this spindle arrangements, which is commencing the heavy very much fastly. The jig boring machine, coming to the parts, internal parts, the spindle head will quite common with respect to a normal boring machine. Coming to the case of this zig boring machine, an additional feature that is being asserted that very accurate results will be getting generated. So accurate results in the sense in the case of our diameters or else our dimensions, we can say. So accurate dimensions will be achieved rather than when compared to the horizontal or vertical case of this boring machines. Zig machines plays a major role for getting the accurate results upon operating. Most probably, the zig boring machines are utilized for producing the jigs and fixtures, which will be utilizing for holding the objects in the case of this lathe machines, milling machines, drilling machines, etc. Not only these jigs and fixtures, but also some of the tools and then other precision parts that are required for monitoring. You need to get the good precision oriented dimensions in the opposite parts. I think, but you need to get or operate over the work parts, tools need to be utilized. So that tools will be getting developed in this jig boring machine because of its accuracy in machining. So almost all, when compared to the almost all the machineries, this jig boring machine have the affinity of getting the better accuracy. Here, the spindle and other parts are very much rigid in order to resist the deflection and vibration, so that will be achieving the perfect dimensions without any deviations regarding it. Even the spindle run in the preloaded anti-friction bearings. There's one advantage with this jig boring machine, that it's having the capability of operating even in the temperature controlled room, which is maintained with respect to a constant in range with respect to the temperature, and nominally with respect to the pressure, with respect to the volume in different mediums, in the case of this gaseous or else liquid offenses of mediums, which makes the perfect blending operational strategies in the case of this chemical industries. Coming to the cutting point for this boring, as clearly initiating with respect to the in the diagram, the, when the rotating tool, with respect to the rotating tool, size is being controlled by changing its radial position. So radial position in the sense with respect to its circumferential distance from the horizon. So from the position of the tool side will be having changing in its radial positions, and that can be controlled, betterly controlled without any deviations with respect to its origin to the end find length, horizon to the end find length. So it will be better equal in strategy at almost all the situations, because entire beyond this entire spindle axis of rotation, particularly for finishing machining, these bore bars are additionally mounted in order to adjustable boring head for getting the better precise control of this particular bars that are being commencing in the radial position. So it's in circumferential positions. So these are the boring bars which are used for commencing the activities and holding up the tools. And it's the basic difference between this boring head or this cutter head, boring head or cutter head. So both are similar in per the nomenclature and as per of the design criteria or utilization of the machinery. We will be calling the terminologies according to our convenience. Normally, these boring heads are used for the mounting cutters in the machining of these large diameter holes with respect to a standard boring bar, even that is unsuitable due to the smaller diameter. And even two or more cutters that are being held on a boring head, which are supports and reduce the machine time because of the large number of cutting edges that need to be have in the case of this machining process. So because of this ascent of factor, reducing the lead timings and completing the machining process within the less span of time. That's a speciality of this boring. But even another one more parameter, it is that getting the better accuracy in the case of results. These are the pictorial representations of the boring heads, which holds without any radial spread formations, which holds very much tightly. So we will not be having radial deviations in the case of dimensions. This is the related to boring machineries and working of boring machineries and different types of tools and its classifications and types. And from tomorrow, in the tomorrow's class, we would like to proceed with respect to the next topic. Thank you.